I'm asking everyone to please rise and let's salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. My name is Chuck Kunowich. I'm the chair of the Hudson Republican Town Committee, and you are at an event that we call Civics Matters, which is an open to the public forum designed not only to educate people about the issues, whether it's local, state, or even national, but to also, get community action going on so that people can say, oh my God, he's a Republican, I didn't know that. And to get people comfortable with communicating and to seeing each other as people, not as mortal enemies. So ultimately, that's the whole purpose of Civics Matters. Next month, we have ballot questions 1 and 2 on the table. We've got the state auditor has agreed to come, and I have not been able to get an elected official to come. So I actually found a quick interview on TV that I'm going to record, and we're going to have her give her, not her, the person on the TV, she doesn't know it, but she's going to be the against person for the ballot question next month. And then we have ballot question 2 also up on deck. So,
do you know what date that is next
month? The third Thursday. Third Thursday, yeah, we do it the third Thursday. And I've just recently received confirmation. We have our speaker lined up in November. November is our season of reasons to be thankful. And we have a woman who spent time in communist China, and she's going to tell us about life there, and most importantly, why she's happy and grateful to be here, and to remind us why we should be grateful to be here as well. We don't meet in December, and January we have the town clerk lined up to speak about election integrity, particularly in Hudson. So, and then later on we'll have the either the finance committee or more likely the town manager will come and talk about the articles that the town will be voting on. So that's the kind of stuff we do, and hopefully you can pass the word. I'd love to see you. You don't have to be from Hudson to show that you care. All right, I think that's pretty much all I need to say. Does anyone need to say anything to add or anything to it? Okay, let's get into it. We're very fortunate that we're able to get our guests tonight that we have. We have ballot questions 4 and 5, and we have Graham sitting next door to me here. Question 4 is limited legalization and regulation of certain natural psychedelic substances. And then on no and 4, we have Ryan. Where did he go? Right down there. And then on 5, we have Estefania. She's over here. And you go by
Tefa. T-E-F-A, Tefa.
So, and then we have Grace, her come along with her. And then Jessica is no on 5, which is the minimum wage for tipped workers. So let me do a quick introduction. We're going to start with question 5. Jessica needs to be out. She has actually more places to go and more people to persuade. So, so we're going to start with ballot question 5, the minimum wage for tipped workers. But let me tell you a little bit about Jessica. She graduated from UMass. Jessica earned a master's degree in public administration, which laid the groundwork to harness her passion for helping and advocating on behalf of small business. Jessica started as chief of staff in the office of the assistant minority leader in the Mass General Court. She went on to serve as chief of staff for the Massachusetts Executive Office of Labor and Workforce, where she directed daily operations, strategic planning, project management for the Departments of Unemployment Assistance, Career Services, Labor Standards, Industrial Accidents, Labor Relations, and Family and Medical Leave Implementation. This has all brought her to now representing the Massachusetts Restaurant Association as Director of Government Affairs, where she goes before state regulatory agencies, the state legislature, and municipal governments. She is tasked to oversee advocacy, lobbying, community relations, and policy development for the Mass Restaurant Association. So let's welcome Jessica. Thank you, Jessica. And then just one quick thing. On 5, I'll do the introductions, and then Jessica, you're going to go first and tell us what you need to tell us. Again, this is conversational, but let her do the talking, and when she's ready to take questions, she'll let you know. Estefania Tefa is a former union worker and restaurant worker. Tefa has worked in minimum wage jobs and sub-minimum wage jobs in New York City, which share many similarities to Boston dining. She is originally from Colombia, where she was forced to migrate from at the age of 15. She is now the chair of the Yes on 5 ballot question. Her assistant tonight, Grace, where's Grace? Where is she? Hi, Grace. Is a worker, organizer, and server in Boston. Grace has been a resident of the greater Boston area for 6 years and is originally from Minnesota, which she says is a state that has never had a sub-minimum wage, yet has a very profitable restaurants. So let's welcome Grace, and let's get right into Jessica. And Jessica, please welcome and tell us why you're here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chuck. So again, my name is Jessica Moradian, and I work for the Massachusetts Restaurant Association. And just to set the ground so everyone knows what question 5 does, it removes the tip credit right now that is really in the restaurant industry and allows for tip pooling with non-service staff. So right now, the only folks that can participate in the tip pool are service staff. So in the restaurant industry, that's your servers and your bartenders. So let's make it super clear, there's no such thing as a sub-minimum wage in the restaurant industry. Restaurant workers are making $15 an hour. They have to make $15 an hour. And if they don't make $15 an hour during a shift, it is the law that a restaurant owner makes up the difference. That is a labor law that has to be followed just like any other labor law in the state of Massachusetts, and there are treble damages attached if you do not follow that law. There are industries in the state of Massachusetts that have a sub-minimum wage. So if we want to talk about sub-minimum wages, maybe we should really talk about those industries. But the restaurant industry isn't one. And why did the Massachusetts Restaurant Association and a ton of other associations and chambers get involved in this question? Not only because we had restaurant operators that own small businesses like Rail Trail down the street and Welly's down the street and the Speakeasy and a few places in Marlborough. You have Kennedy's, you have Wemmy's, all these places right here that are independently owned restaurants that not only did they come and say, help us, we're still struggling from the pandemic, where is this money going to come from? But more importantly, their servers and bartenders came to us and said, we don't want this. So we said, let's look at stuff and see what servers and bartenders are actually saying. So you'll see I gave you some information I passed out, and we did a geographically diverse poll that was conducted by an outside entity that shows that 86% of servers and bartenders in the state of Massachusetts think that the current system works for them. 88% oppose a tip pool where tips are shared with non-service staff, and 90% believe that they will make less money. Let's be clear. We do not have a wage problem in the restaurant industry in Massachusetts. We asked servers and bartenders, on average, what are you making? Over 90% of them said, on average, we are making more than $20 an hour. This is not in Boston. This is all over the state. And oh, by the way, more than 60% of them said we're making more than $30 an hour. So we're here because we want to see the restaurant industry continue to flourish and come out of the pandemic. There are other states that don't have a tip credit, and that's fine, but they've never had a tip credit. The only place where we can really look to and say, let's see how a policy change worked, is Washington, D.C. And let's look at that example. Washington, D.C., over the past year and a half, has lost more than 4,000 jobs for servers and bartenders. That's 10% of the working staff. Do you want our working staff going to New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut? No, we want them to have jobs in Massachusetts. So I'm here to urge you to vote no, help our servers and bartenders, help our restaurants flourish, and just realize that folks in the restaurant industry here in your area aren't asking for this. This is coming from out of state, and we're here to say, listen to our own servers and bartenders and what they're asking for. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're a good speaker.
Should we come speakers, or should we have Tefa?
It's up to the room, it's your room.
So
No,
well,
it's up to you
know,
people. Get
so-
up.
Yeah?
Represent it.
How do you feel? Grace?
Defending us right now.
I can go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much for having us, by the way. Thank you to Chuck for reaching out. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all and be in the same room with Jessica. Thank you all for having us. I have something written down. As I said, my name is Grace McGovern. I have been a Massachusetts resident for the past 6 years. I originally come from Minnesota. I studied at Northeastern and worked my way through college. Throughout high school, I worked in food service jobs in Minnesota, one of the states that does not have a sub-minimum wage, but has very yummy restaurants that all of us really enjoy eating out at. And neither of the representatives here for Yes on 5 are flown in from California. None of the workers that I work with on a day-to-day basis are from any other state besides Massachusetts. I talk to workers and voters from this state because we're talking about this state. So that's one point I want to counter very quickly. In Massachusetts, the tipped minimum wage is only $6.75 an hour, less than half of the state's full minimum wage of $15 an hour. Ending this low-wage carve-out positively impacts almost 125,000 tipped workers in Massachusetts and the restaurant industry as a whole. Workers in sub-minimum wage states have twice the rate of poverty compared to states without. The loss in wages here ends in workers relying more on SNAP benefits and welfare and putting less money back into the economy. I don't know if you're aware, but in 2023, the Attorney General's office estimated that there was $1 billion lost in wage theft cases. So yes, there is a law that is supposed to require employers to make it up to the full $15 an hour, but that doesn't always happen. And a $1 billion loss in a wage theft is $100 million lost in revenue for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So this is leaving people with less money to put back into the economy. I would also like to say that as a restaurant worker, the best tippers and the people who really love eating out at restaurants are your restaurant workers, and we're gonna keep eating out if we get paid better. I can guarantee that. Question 5 would increase the tipped minimum wage incrementally over the course of 5 years until it reaches the full minimum wage of $15 an hour plus tips on top. Now think about that. 2029 is when it is finally at $15 an hour. For the first year, it is only a $2.40 jump for each tipped employee. It's not as drastic as the No on 5 side wants you to think. It's only $2.40-something per tipped employee for the first year. It's an incremental increase. After those 5 years, restaurants and bars will have the option of including back-of-house workers in tip pools. They are not required to include back-of-house workers in tip pools. There is an option. It just creates the opportunity to share the tips more freely. Some restaurants may not even follow it. But another point I'd like to bring up is that many support staff, as someone who worked in a restaurant, end up coming in and helping out on tipped work and then not being tipped out. Restaurants operate as a team. You know, I am always running back down to the kitchen because someone wants a different sauce, and then you bring them ranch and they actually want honey mustard instead. And you know who's grabbing me those sauces? The support staff, right. And they're not getting tipped out. And you know who's cleaning the plates for me because I've got a party of 20 that just walked in who didn't call ahead? It's the support staff who are helping me get my tables rushed over so that I can make more money because I can serve more people. The opposition also will claim that tips will go away. This is false. Tips in other states with one fair wage haven't gone away. Some states, in fact, tip higher. I just would like to say that also we're facing something called a tip fatigue. We are always pressured to tip all of the time. And I, for one, again, as an industry worker, don't want the common person coming down for their after-work beer to feel like they have to tip me 25% because I poured them a blonde ale. It's not that much work. You know, if I'm letting you sample every beer on the menu and giving you recommendations, then maybe I want a little, you know, maybe I'll expect it. But I don't think that customers should be in charge of subsidizing the labor costs for these employers. And that's my spiel.
Very nice. Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
If I heard you correctly, I think you said the state of Massachusetts might collect more revenue if the minimum wage was raised, because they can get the FICA taxes out of it.
Yep.
So FICA, that's actually
No.
false. So tips are wages,
Right.
and you need to claim them, and for purposes of SUTA taxes, FICA taxes, everything, those are included. So let's look at a state like California where the minimum wage is higher here, and let's compare how much those folks are making as tipped workers there to here. Guess what? Massachusetts servers and bartenders, wages plus tips, make $1 more on average than folks in California. And that's not me telling you that. Go to BLS data and find it right there. This is why servers and bartenders don't want this here.
Can I speak?
Well,
Sure.
didn't states like California who did this, didn't they find a lot of their restaurants closed?
So they did something different. They didn't actually get rid of a tip credit. They've never had a tip credit. They increased their minimum wage, and then with every $1 increase in the minimum wage, you do see a correlation of employees losing their jobs. And oh, by the way, one more quick point so you know, this is not an increase to $15 an hour. This is an increase to whatever the minimum wage is at the time. It's a % increase. So if you are crazy enough to think that in Massachusetts in 2029, we are still gonna have a $15 minimum wage, I beg you to think about that closely.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, like, I personally, like, support this as someone that has been in the industry with Grace, because one of the big problems that happens is that young people, particularly young women, people that are transitioning careers, right? Those are the folks that this is gonna affect. This is not really gonna affect someone that has been in the industry for 20 years, right? This is really gonna affect folks who have this like as a second job, you know, like our teachers' aides, they make $30,000 and they have to have a job on the side. So this is that situation. And so in terms of that, one of the big problems in the industry is that it is an industry that, because of the tipping system, it allows a lot for harassment. And it's just a reality that, like, it doesn't matter what race or what political affiliation you are, or even if you're a woman or a man, you can ask your bartenders, like, and your servers, they have had an experience of harassment. And the reason why it's so prevalent is because you have to accept the harassment so that you can make the tips. And so we're trying to separate our bodies from our money and like feel secure at work. Another thing that I really wanted to mention is that, you know, I want people to think about like how do you think you would respond to a survey that your boss is asking you to fill out?
Right.
So bosses, just so you know, your bosses didn't ask people to
And this
fill
is
out.
also like the kind of situation that
Yeah.
like, I just want you to see how our opposition is acting right now. Like, I'm a little shaky because it feels like very like, and like, they do this to us all the time. Like, I constantly have to leave. Like, we know the opposition is calling and threatening, like, the opposition is calling the restaurants. It's a lie to say that the restaurants are calling the opposition, and we know this for a fact. Also, the Massachusetts Restaurant Association is part of the National Restaurant Association, which is funded by Applebee's and all of these big chains. And so, you know, just to say there is a lot of misinformation, and to say that here in this room, like we are workers, that we are risking a lot. Like we are risking our security when we are going out, when my address and my phone number, I get calls of harassment, and the harassment is happening to us, not from us. And that is one of the main issues that we're facing. This is not just an economic issue, this is a safety issue, and this is a community issue. We want our communities to go into restaurants that everyone's thriving, right? Like you like to go somewhere that like everyone's feeling good about like the food that they're getting, everyone's feeling good about what this is doing to their economy. And let me tell you, fear is very strong. Fear is such a powerful weapon.
Can you be more clear? I'm having a hard time understanding where the fear is coming from. In other words, is it coming from outside forces because of your politics, of what you're doing with ballot question, or is it because you're a server? I'm confused.
Yeah.
I would just say, to nicely wrap up the fear part, all of the workers that I have spoken to are scared to say something because their bosses are giving them these flyers and saying you're going to lose your tips, you're going to lose your jobs. I've talked to so many people who are 100% in favor of this and say, I will not say anything because I need my job. I need my restaurant job and I don't have another option.
And there's a power dynamic, right? There's a business owner and a worker.
But they're not going to know how you vote. I mean, I don't.
No,
but they will know if
voting,
you say.
no, but being a spokesperson, being
well,
vocal.
for you guys, yeah. I mean,
Yes.
yeah, you're.
No, but we have like what she's sharing is that we have talked to many restaurant workers
Yeah.
who are with us, but they request everything be anonymous because they know, and it has happened before, that if a restaurant finds out that they're advocating for Yes on 5, they will get fired. So there is retaliation happening.
So I don't know anyone who's retaliated against anyone. I don't know anyone that is forcing anyone to do anything. We actually have,
and you
can
didn't
just
finish
keep-
speaking.
Oh, I thought
so
you were.
what I wanted to
Wait,
finish
she
up
was.
with.
Give
I
her-
thought
she
you
was
were
speaking.
done.
She was speaking.
I
I thought you
wasn't
were done.
done.
Okay, you guys
Grace
can pause.
did-
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
yeah,
continue.
Hold on.
No. Let them go. Continue. Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to talk about the power dynamic.
Yeah.
Right, like which
Go
is where I
ahead.
got cut off. I feel like that I was talking to you, Chuck, in response to what you asked. There is a power dynamic of a business owner and a worker, right? And a business owner has business owner interest, and a worker has worker interest, right? And a business owner owns something, right? Majority of workers don't own things.
Okay.
They maybe own their bed and their computer, right? So they are working paycheck to paycheck, right? So who do you think has more power in that equation?
In that equation. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And that is the question in most places.
But the and I don't want to go down that
Mhm.
that path because again I'm trying to understand
Yeah.
what's at play here, because the thing that I'm having the most difficult time understanding is Jessica said that you cannot be paid less than minimum wage, that the boss has to make up for that money. So I don't understand why this is even a question, because if you're getting the money, you're getting the money.
Yeah, so Chuck, can
What
I-
am I misunderstanding?
Yeah. So a few things. Wage theft, as we've talked about before, encompasses many, 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 many things. It is not just restaurant workers not getting paid the full minimum wage. And guess what? If someone is doing that, shame on them, and they should have to pay treble damages, because we have a lot of restaurant owners that are making sure that they make up the difference. But I would like you to try and find a server or bartender that on a regular basis is not making at least $15 an hour. Now, if you're saying that there's people that are being harassed to pass these out or do something, I really find that hard to believe, because we have, if you look at the list of people that have donated to the No campaign, you're gonna find a ton of servers and bartenders that have done that. And let me tell you, that's their own money. That's their money talking. They don't have to do that, right? So they know, because they're looking at the data, that they are going to make less, and they don't wanna make less. I mean, we have servers and bartenders that will tell you, I put people, myself, or my family through college. I have raised a family with tipped wages. I have bought a house with tipped wages. I have done many things with tipped wages. And oh, by the way, yeah, absolutely. Teachers, they bartend during the summers, or they are servers. One of the first people that I had call my phone at work to talk about this was a teacher. And they said, guess what? Please help me, because if this passes, I'm not gonna have a summer job anymore, because I make a lot of money during the summer, and I can count on working Thursday nights, Friday nights, Saturday nights, know that I'm gonna make a bunch of money, and then I get to spend the day with my family, right?
There was a question over here. Yep, two of them.
Sure. I eat out a lot because I work
Yeah.
really long hours, and my experience when I talk to servers is just the opposite of these numbers. I mean, the numbers supporting this are closer to this. And I have talked to workers who are forced to wear the buttons, are forced to, so there is coercion, number one. Number two, if these numbers are correct, can you provide us with the independent professional polling company that did them?
To write on our website. You can go right
You know
to it
who it
and I
is?
can send it to you. Yep. We'll send it over to Chuck.
And
Okay.
So he has
it's a real
information.
polling
Yep,
company?
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so, my question and kind of a comment too is I definitely agree with Grace. The tipping fatigue, since COVID, I have felt that 100%. I've traveled to many different countries, China, Vietnam, Japan, Germany, Peru. No other country in the world tips like we do. But there's great cuisine, there's great restaurants throughout the world. Why do you think that having us go to the same standard that the rest of the world does, why would that impact the amount of restaurants, the great restaurants that we have?
Where do you think the difference in this is the money is going to come from? So restaurants, the way we run restaurants right now here is back of the house, and this is what the other side will say is back of the house is making more money than the front of the house, right? And that's not true, but an owner is paying someone in the back of the house a flat wage, and that's why they're not making tips. The front of the house, the service workers, have decided that's where I want to work, so I can maximize the amount of money that I want to make in a short period of time. So we just run our economy different. And there are 43 other states in the great country of America that run their economy like we do. Why do we need to change it? We don't see servers and bartenders say, we need to change it. We don't see business owners say, we need to change it. This is going to cost the average restaurant $18,500 per employee per year. And that's just simple math. And you know how they're going to make that up? Let's look at Washington, D.C. Service fees. And you know where those service fees goes? Can I just...
Wait, yeah,
Can I just
I want
finish?
Grace, I'm
It's
gonna
simple.
have you talk next,
Yeah,
but
it's just
let her finish.
Simple math. But where is that going to come? Service fees, right? And a service fee, and that's what a lot of restaurants and other places that don't have a tipped wage do. You go sit down, and instead of saying like, you know what, Ryan did a great job. I'm going to pay him. I'm going to give him 25% tip because that's what people are tipping in Massachusetts in restaurants. Yes, there's tip fatigue, but not in restaurants. People have tip fatigue in counter service places,
Right.
and that's not what
That's
we're
true.
talking about here.
Well, just to follow up to that, you're saying service fees. I mean, so I'm someone that tips almost 20% all the time unless
Great.
it's either really bad or really good
Right.
experience.
If you're in California, you're not doing that. just so you
But
know.
a service fee, how much is the service fee going to be? Is it going to be 10%, 50%,
In
20%?
Washington D.C., it's 20%. And
So
guess
then
what?
I actually, as a consumer, I end up coming out neutral. But the people who might not tip at all, or tip 5% or
Right, they'll be
10%,
paying.
who I'm subsidizing,
So the-
now they have to by standard, they have to tip. So it's almost making up
So
for
two
the
things.
bad tippers and for the people that are good tippers.
So the average tip in Massachusetts is 22% right now. And oh, by the way, that service fee isn't a tip. It's a service fee. It does not have to go to your tipped employees. It can make up the difference. We're saying keep the money with the server and the bartender, sorry, Ryan, that actually worked and was your service, right? Like you go to a restaurant, didn't we learn this during the pandemic? What was the one silver line of the pandemic? When restaurants opened again and we had outdoor eating, right? We all wanted to go to restaurants. And why did we want to go to restaurants? So we could sit with each other and enjoy a meal, and so we could have service, right? Because servers and bartenders work really, really hard, and they deserve their tips.
I have a question.
Before Claire,
You said something.
Yeah.
I could see Grace had something to say, and I
Yeah,
wanted to say it.
absolutely.
So I would love to say, first of all, yes, we all were so excited to go back to restaurants and be served by our wonderful servers. Be served by the workers we're talking about, that we want to pay in 1 year $2 more. Also, the $18,000 simple math per year per tipped employee. The MRA just keeps throwing this number out, and I would like to say the difference between $15 and $6.75 is $8.25. $8.25 times 52 weeks in a year, times 40 hours a week. That's if you're working 40 hours every single week for the year. Equals $17,160.
Right.
That's if the immediate jump was to the full $15 an hour. Again, it's only $2 in the first year. So first of all, in 5 years, the difference is $17,160.
Grace, there's taxes on when you
Wait.
pay wages. Just
Wait.
so you know, there's taxes when you pay wages. Sorry.
Yep.
But just saying, the simple math is not, yes. And also, people don't like service fees, so increasing the wages would restrict us from doing that. Because if you increase the base wage, you don't need to tack on an extra service fee to get to the minimum wage.
Isn't Jessica saying that that's what they do? In other words, to get to that wage, they add the 20% on?
Some
Yes, they
restaurants
do.
have, but people don't respond well. People respond well when
Okay.
the employees are just paid well,
So-
and then you can tip an actual tip.
So every restaurant in Massachusetts that has said we're paying $15 full wage to all of our staff, and just so you know, they can do that right now. If a restaurant owner wants to do that and the staff wants to do that, go to town. You can do that. It's not against the law. But I've also heard from each one of those restaurants that they're tacking on a service fee. This money is coming from somewhere. Just go to Washington, D.C. and see how they do it. There's service fees everywhere.
So does tipping actually get better service? In other words, if you're not incentivized by tipping, does that mean that as an individual, obviously I can tell that you just can't help yourself. But a lot of servers are not. So would that affect the attitude of people in general?
I think there are going to be lazy people always, unfortunately.
Not Grace. Grace will work hard.
Yes,
Right,
thank you.
right.
And that's going to happen no matter what. But those people are going to leave the
But
industry.
don't they get rewarded for providing me as a consumer a good experience?
Yes, absolutely. But I think if you're paid the base minimum wage, then a tip, again back to the tip fatigue thing, can be an actual tip. It's not just making sure that it's not me working my butt off so that my boss can pay me less hourly. It's me working my butt off so you have a great dinner, and then you don't have to worry about thinking, oh, she's getting paid $6.75 an hour. A good tip really isn't 20%. A good tip is actually like 30 or 40. I don't have money for that. It's you thinking, oh, I love this girl. I can give her 20 because I can afford that.
Right.
See, I
Claire?
look at it this way. How many times have you gone to a restaurant? Now, I'm out every Wednesday with a group of senior citizens. We bowl every Wednesday. We have a great time, and a bunch of us always go out to lunch afterwards. We go to a different restaurant every week. Some of the restaurants charge extra for the tip. You're charged the tip in your total bill.
Yeah, they tack an automatic.
And, which I think is unfair to the, because how do we know that worker's actually getting that tip?
Oh, well, if it's a tip, they have to get that tip.
Well, yeah, I suppose, but I
Tiffany,
like
yeah.
to be able to tip the waitress for doing a good job.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're saying here. You need to be able to tip.
Tefia,
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the people we're fighting for are like, and whether you like it or not, are not people that are like fully fluent in English or are people that have lived in the United States for 50 years.
Right.
The people that we're fighting for
They don't have options.
are people that are like are in the industry, are trying their best, are really trying to like be part of, and like they are the ones that are fulfilling the jobs. Also, in terms of the pandemic, as much as we were happy that restaurant workers were coming back, restaurant workers were deathly afraid of going back to the workplace. And the reason why they were forced to come back early on was because many of them, including myself, we did not make enough means because sometimes you change restaurants so often, you have to prove like a certain amount of income for you to be able to receive benefits. I was not able to receive benefits, so I was in a very tough situation where like I either had to go back to work or had to go back to work. And I, as a matter of fact, had to work through the pandemic because my tipped wages did not bring me up to be able to be taken care of. I worked in both. I worked in a sub-minimum wage restaurant, as I mentioned, and a minimum wage restaurant. In the sub-minimum wage restaurant, at the beginning, everything's super cool. But then 3 months in, my checks started to change. And when I asked my manager what was happening with my checks, they were like, oh no, it's just that we figured out that we just have to pay you $675. And I was like, that's not the law, you have to bring me up. And it became actually a little hard to leave my workplace because they really liked me because I brought a lot of people in. But they were stealing my wages, and I was new in the city, you know, like I was new. English is not my first language, and I am not a lawyer, and I don't have lawyer friends or money for lawyers. And so what happens is like when they start stealing your money, you don't do anything about it. You just leave, and then you go find somewhere else. So even though we have numbers on wage theft, those are actually like really low numbers to what actually is happening. And wage theft is not happening to people that the system works for. Like if you are fluent in English and went to college and maybe you went through a law school or something and you can like negotiate your way, right? The wages are stolen from people that are really trying to feed their families.
Stolen is a very, very inflammatory word, and I'm not saying that you're
Yeah.
wrong, because if it was stolen, it was stolen. But I want you to
No,
understand.
definitely.
You know?
I'm sorry, like my English is my second language also, so I also want you to.
So just a really quick thing about the pandemic. The way unemployment works isn't because you offer one job, you're not eligible for unemployment. Oh, and by the way, during the pandemic, you didn't have to go back to work, and when you were on unemployment, the government was giving you another $600 to
Right.
stay on unemployment. So let's remember that as well.
So there was-
that was my
yeah.
past life, right? What I did work during. the
You're
pandemic
next, but
as
I
well.
want to go with you next here, and then John.
Oh, I was just gonna clarify, so yes, like there are certain circumstances, wages are stolen, and then there are circumstances where, yeah, they're stolen and maybe but it happens more often, like, you know, I've worked at 2 places and, you know, English is my first language, but anxiety is also a big first language. So, you know, when I am not getting paid by these small restaurants, I leave because I don't know how to communicate, hey, y'all aren't paying me correctly. So yeah, that is happening to people, and, you know, just
Get it?
nervous people.
John.
Yeah.
that don't know how to fight
John.
for
Yeah, there's
themselves.
other people, yeah.
Yeah, John.
Well, first, I just want to comment on a couple things. Grace, not to give you a hard time, you talked about coming from Minnesota and situations, and their restaurants do fine. Their overhead in Minnesota is a hell of a lot less than Massachusetts. Okay, so you can afford to pay people more, in theory, to get good employees, okay, than you can in this state. The other thing which I find a little odd about here, I personally think that I can believe more your side hearing the calls, because I ran nightclubs and restaurants in the 70s into the 80s, okay? I have a lot of friends still in the business. I know how many restaurants have closed down. If you monitor, example, the city of Worcester, how many restaurants are shutting down? They keep bragging about how many open, but for every one that opens in Worcester, 2 to 3 close, okay? You look at the chain restaurants, okay? all the major chains are closing restaurants because basically the costs have just gotten too high. The tip aspect of it, I don't know a single server or a single bartender ever in my life that ever claimed all their tips. And if you tell me you know them, you're full of shit.
I know
Okay.
John personally, and I can tell you he keeps many restaurants in business.
I mean, I'm going to give you an example. A friend of mine who ran a bar, who sadly died during COVID, was making more money during COVID than he was making managing the bar because he was getting that government assistance program for people in the restaurant and bar industry. Okay? His daughter works in the North End 3 days a week. She does, she goes in about 4 o'clock. She's got a regular job. Okay? She's an excellent bartender. She's very personable when she's at the bar. And she makes over $100,000 a year. Okay? What does she claim? I don't know.
Well,
but
that's between her and her,
right.
you know.
Well, I will tell
So
you.
my point with all this is, I don't understand the harassment thing. Also, you get food costs up. I think I'm pretty close, Jessica. It's 46% across
Depending
the
on
board.
what food you're talking about, but I mean.
On
yes.
average, every restaurant owner I know has told me across the board, whether it be Chinese, seafood, whatever, on average it's up 46% since COVID. So, you know, it's all well and good to want, but be careful what you wish for, because it might put your employer out of business.
Right.
I think DJ, is it DJ?
Lefty.
Okay.
I know.
Again, you know? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I looked up polling, and then I Googled the company that does the polling, and it's a push polling company.
It's Carnegie Mellon University.
It's Corcol, it's Corcom.
Carnegie Mellon University did the poll.
It says on your website, Corcom, and then I looked it up, let me finish. And Corcom is rated very low, and they did an online poll rather than an in-person poll or anything like that, so it's very, very inaccurate. And the first thing that you do when you look up Corcom, the first word that comes up, the first phrase that comes up is, I wouldn't quite call this a scam, but then it went on to explain. So this is not a legitimate poll.
Well,
I'm glad you raised the point because it just shows that when we look at these things, we have to give them what I call the hairy eyeball, no matter who it's given from.
Right.
so Chuck, I will just want to say, the reason we did it, the reason the poll was done online is exactly what everyone's talking about, right? We didn't want an owner to go up and say, do this poll, right? We wanted people to be able to do it independently on their own time, on their phone, so they wouldn't have felt pushed. It was done by Carnegie Mellon University. They used a company to do that, and you know, people can write whatever they want on the internet, right? They're free to say that anyone is feeling the way that they feel, but I mean, the servers and bartenders that I talk to, the servers and bartenders that are going out in droves and putting their own rallies together. There was a rally in front of the State House when this originally came out, and there was a hearing on it, 9 a.m. in the morning.
I was
On
there.
a Wednesday.
I was there.
Yep, I was there too.
It was
I
so
wasn't,
scary.
and I wasn't standing there with a sign. I was
It
on
was
the other
so
side. I
scary.
was watching all the servers and bartenders that were there. There were 100 servers and bartenders
It was
there
not 100.
with no signs, and I didn't see any servers or bartenders there with yes signs. So
We were
it
there.
is what it was. There were like 8 people. There were like 8 people with yes signs. So it's you know,
I mean,
there's numbers and there's.
I also want to go back to the power dynamic, right? Like, there was the owner with the people that work at his restaurant, like 2 owners with people that work at the restaurants that brought people. All of them were white. There was a couple of young women of color, which were impressed. Like, I was impressed. And actually, when we were in the hearing, we were talking about the harassment part. We have a worker who left the industry actually after COVID because she no longer wanted to teach other women to have to accept harassment for tips. Like, she kind of caught herself, and it just was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And she now has decided to move on to the industry. Like many people, like myself, after COVID, because we didn't get a raise. Everybody loved us, but we didn't get a raise. We didn't get proper pay when we were being asked to police and take care of the restaurants while serving people. And the truth of the matter is that what happened that day actually has happened before, which is that this group of people come at us and just like shout at us, and shout and are just really, and
Do you know who the group of people is? Is it?
is their group.
So
Like
we
the people
don't,
she's
we
talking
just,
about.
we're not shouting at anyone. We were
Right.
there and it wasn't us. And just to make it
There
clear,
was,
there was a restaurant owner there that day that went to testify, a woman who was utterly shocked and horrified to hear everyone talk about sexual harassment. She said, if sexual harassment is taking place in my restaurant, I'm putting a stop to it. Let's be honest. There's sexual harassment in every industry all over the place. But the Equal Opportunity Commission has done studies on this, and they have shown that just because tips are eliminated doesn't mean that there's any less sexual harassment in the industry at all or in other industries. There's sexual harassment in every industry. And if there's sexual harassment, shame on the people doing that and shame on the people that are allowing it.
Allowing it, right?
Yeah,
Right,
so
right.
I
with
also
that, I
as a
just,
victim of sexual harassment, a survivor, I would say, of sexual harassment and sexual abuse, I would like to say that it would be really nice if it didn't have to come to like become a survivor, but if there were like precautionary ways to not make people have to be traumatized or to have to deal with this in their lifetime. An economic opportunity is a way to do that. And I just have a question I wanted to ask everyone. Before you tip at a restaurant, do you ask the server how much money they made?
That would be very rude.
Right? That's weird. Exactly, that's my point. Like, that's why tips are not gonna go away. Like, people are gonna know that, first of all, also, talking about math, like, if you're paying, like, if you're $15, right? Like, is in 5 years, right? Like, let's say we're in 5 years from now. Let's say the prices went up, right? I mean, not gonna lie, prices have been going up, and my wages and the wages of a lot of people have not been going up. So that's a different, that's a
'cause of
different monster.
inflation, right?
That's a different monster. But 2019, prices went up. People are making $15 an hour. You want to tip 18%? You know who's not gonna suffer? The worker. You want to know what does fluctuate all the time, depending on the weather, depending on people's moods, depending on whether people had a good day or a bad day at work? Your tips. You know what's not dependent on people's moods or in the weather, particularly in the winter season, is your salary. Like, as a worker that worked in the winter, under a $15 minimum plus tips on top, as a matter of fact, people would come out to the restaurant because they wanted to come hang out with me, and I would get really good tips during the winter, during the day. Like, during the week, during the day, right? So, like, I'm not here talking about, like, a poll. I'm here talking literally about the fact that I knew every week I would work a certain amount of days, and that would mean that my check would be $400, which allowed me to budget for a month to know what I was gonna do, and it did not depend on how many people came into the restaurant, or if the restaurant owner wanted to do the math and the procedures of the gray area of deciding to pay me up to 15%. And most importantly, I was very happy at work. I lived where I worked, I spent money where I worked, I got along really well with the kitchen staff and the staff in the front of the house. And it was great. It was great for the customers. We got busy, we got awesome, and then when the summer came, like, that place was packed.
What
So-
keeps you in the restaurant business? I mean, you know,
I used to be a union worker. I used to work for
and you're not
IATSE.
answering my question. What keeps you in that business? If
What
there's
keeps you?
If there's a business that stinks, I ain't working there. I don't, you know, just.
Oh yeah, I thought you asked me why I misheard you. What keeps you in the restaurant industry?
Yeah.
I don't know, I think that's a question for Grace, because she's still there.
Do you mean if you're currently, do you mean like when she was talking about places leaving because of poor conditions, or are you?
No, he's saying
I am-
if you hate working there, why, or you
I
hate the
think-
conditions and the pay, why do you keep working?
Why do you?
It's only option.
What does that say about, you know, again, please no disrespect here, but if that's your only option, what does that say about what you're bringing to the table?
Very little, and that's That's okay.
So
but
what do we do?
I-
What do we do to give you more options so that you're not relegated to horrible conditions? Because I'm self-employed and I have employees, and I can tell you that I have what's called enlightened self-interest. I treat them right because I don't want to lose them. And my understanding in the restaurant business is, they have a hard time finding help. So if you're good, it would seem to me you could say to them, I think I can do better up the street,
That's what a lot of people do. I think, honestly, like the people that you're talking about, the people that stay even if things are hard, are people that probably have a lot of debt, or people that maybe medical debt, people that have kids.
They have
They have
extenuating
kids, and like,
circumstances,
it's like this is extenuating, and that's why it is like so particular. That's why I don't think that polls like being like, we just did this poll with all these workers, like sort of works, because there is very extenuating circumstances. Like it's different the circumstance that like a 20-year-old has when they have a restaurant job than a 45-year-old has when they have a restaurant job.
Absolutely, Tef is right, and that's why if you go onto our website,
She likes hearing that.
you
by
will
the way.
see
Tef
you will
is
see
right.
numerous servers and bartenders that have said, please, can I participate? I want to stand up and show how I have made a great living. Please stop telling me that I'm a minimum wage worker, because I'm not a minimum wage worker. I've raised my family on this. I mean, there's numerous ones, but I'm sorry, I got another place to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to wrap up.
Yeah.
Everyone's working on it.
I want to go to speak to, I don't have a dog in this fight, I do just.
I don't have a dog in this fight.
I'm not on question 5, we used to work together in the administration.
You are a dog.
To the thing about what else you have to offer if you hate the job, I bartended my way all through college. I had a lot of options, I was not an idiot, I could do a lot of, that fit my schedule and I made a bunch of money, right? I didn't like going in, it was miserable, but I couldn't go work an office job because I had to go to school. I couldn't do construction.
Because of what?
I had to go to school, so I couldn't do construction during the day. I couldn't be a dentist. I was in school, so bartending,
Dentist?
waitering, that fit my schedule. So a lot of people have, it's not like, shit, I'm an idiot. I can't do it. I was good at it, but that was my option because that would fit the schedule. And I'll say that on the good side. On the bad side, if I made minimum wage, I would have not done that.
Right.
I made a lot more with tips than.
One last one. Go ahead.
That was everything.
Wait,
Tom.
Okay.
That's okay.
I have two concerns about this thing here. One is the overhead to a restaurant. When I go into a restaurant, I usually pay with a credit card. They have to pay a service fee for that credit card. The cost of food that they're buying to serve is going up. The rent or the real estate tax on a business is 1.7% higher of the household owners. And in my house, I'm paying $6,000. So if I owned a restaurant, it'd be closer to $7,500 to $8,000. The more you raise the cost of eating out, the less people are going to be eating out, or the less often they're going to be eating out. So I'm concerned with also the mom and pop shops who started this business 20 years and put their life into it, and then lose it because they're not getting the customers.
Right.
Because the restaurant revenue depends on who walks in the door and how much they spend.
And a restaurant owner, anyone will tell you, if they're making good profits, it's between 3 and 5%. We're talking pennies on the dollar here. And if you go to another state, you're gonna see that a lot of the restaurants are chain. In Massachusetts, we don't have chain restaurants, very few. So I'm really, really sick of hearing about how like the big bad chains are coming in here. Like, look in Hudson, right? Where are the chains? I don't see any on Main Street. On Main Street, where are they?
Applebee's.
One
Go ahead.
Applebee's.
Wrap it up here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because it is true, servers make a lot of money, but what is interesting is, in a restaurant, it is a whole team thing. So, while minimum wage or wage is telling me I'm making $6 an hour, my back of house staff is only making $17 an hour. Whilst I've just been tipped, I'm walking home making like $50 an hour.
If you can find a dishwasher
So-
in Hudson that makes $17 an hour, I'll be shocked. Nobody, there's not a dishwasher, a 15-year-old kid that is going into a restaurant in Hudson making $15 an hour or
What are they making?
$17
What are
an
they
hour.
making?
You can't hire anyone. They're
So what are they
18,
making?
19, $20 an hour
Okay.
already.
Okay, so they're $20 an hour. I'm walking home every morning making like $40 an hour. I could give them some of that if we're pooling tips. I'm like, let me
So
give
why
it
don't
to.
you?
I mean,
it's not
because
allowed.
because it's not
But wait a second.
nobody because
So-
I'm not making.
But
you
wait
know
a
what
second,
I
I
mean?
thought servers weren't making enough
Right,
money.
Ken.
So now I'm confused a
Yeah,
little
it's,
bit, right?
it's
And that's
interesting.
where
We
I
gotta
go
wrap,
back-
we gotta get ready to
But
wrap
just
this
to
up.
say, that's where it goes back to like what servers we're fighting for, and just to remind you, we're not fighting for the servers that already make money.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
fighting for the servers
That don't.
and the people
Yeah.
that don't, because it's a big pool of people, right?
Yeah,
And
there's
so
some servers making.
we're
60,
so
there's
diverse, like
some
even in
servers
this
making
room,
10.
which, thank you so much, Chuck.
Thank you, thank you.
For like, because this is my type of place. I also believe in seeing each other as people and like being respectful for each other and being kind to each other. So I also wanted to say thank you so much, Chuck,
Thank
for
you.
giving us the opportunity to be
Yeah.
here. And I do know that we do have our comrades and friends from
Good.
Norm 4, so we should definitely give this.
All
Chuck,
right.
thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
Grace and Tefa, thank you so much as well.
Thank you. Thank you
Really
for coming.
appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.
Okay, the plan is to go into the next questions, but I allocated like a half an hour, and he said, so we got a few minutes, so do you want to go right into it, or do you want to get something to snack and take a restroom break? What's what people feel?
I'm happy to go into it.
Like an hour and a half.
Ready to rock? Ready to rock and roll?
But whatever the crowd, whatever the audience, whatever other people want.
Let's go.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Ride that energy.
All right, so let's rock and roll. All right, so now let's talk about question 4, limited legalization and regulation of certain natural psychedelic substances. We have Graham Moore. He's speaking on 4. He is a volunteer advocate in support of access to psychedelic treatments. He is motivated from his own personal experiences with obsessive compulsive disorder. He was not only a patient at Mass General, but he is also a caregiver for 2 loved ones with severe major depressive disorder. One of them is diagnosed as complex PTSD, which is leading to hospitalization. So that's Graham Moore. And then on No on 4, we have Ryan Coleman. He is a political and government relations consultant based in Massachusetts. Ryan was previously a member of Governor Charlie Baker's administration, serving as both the legislative director and subsequently the chief secretary in the governor's office. Earlier in his career, Ryan served as political director for Mr. Baker's 24 campaign team, as well as serving in similar roles for various state, federal, and national campaigns. And Ryan currently comes to us from the town of Swampscott. So welcome, you guys.
Thank you.
And,
She gets so excited when
got
I'm in
something to
class.
say.
Happening.
Can we get him some water or anything out of a little bowl?
Like, what is happening? Come here.
So if you want, we give him some ice water in one of the little bowls
Oh,
by
no,
him.
it's okay. She's fine.
So maybe Graham, could you open us up and tell us about how you came to us? and-
Sure. So I need to first correct that I was a volunteer. I am now a paid staffer for the Yes on 4 campaign. I'm very
Excellent.
proud
Good
to
for
be
you. Good for
doing
you.
that.
Good for you.
I also want to thank you, Chuck, for welcoming me here and all of us here. I want to thank everybody for showing up, and I want to thank Ryan for showing up and speaking up on behalf of public health from his perspective. I want everybody to do what they think is right. The Natural Psychedelics Ballot Measure, question 4, is an evidence-based policy rooted in the principles of compassion, fairness, and common sense. All of the substances that we're proposing to make access in a legal, regulated fashion are already available legally for therapeutic purposes abroad, including 2, psilocybin and ibogaine, which are prescription medications in Australia and New Zealand for treating treatment-resistant depression and off-label opioid addiction. There is no retail sales component of this. This does not create an industry like cannabis. Under this measure, it would be illegal to go into a store and purchase these substances. By law, in this measure, anyone seeking this treatment will have to be screened medically first, and then after that, they'll have to have 3 appointments. 1, being administered the therapeutic substance under the supervision of a licensed professional. Another appointment to prepare them for that, and a 3rd appointment to help them integrate that experience and make sure they are safe. In addition to that, this policy does remove criminal penalties for limited personal use of these substances. This is to allow law enforcement to focus on serious crime and not waste their time prosecuting people for activity that the research shows is typically benign. People are already accessing these substances. We are in the midst of a mental health, behavioral health crisis. The scale of this crisis is measured not in soft, survey results, but in deaths. Thousands of opioid overdoses in our state every year, hundreds of suicides in our state every year, thousands of tobacco-related deaths, thousands of alcohol-related deaths. Tobacco is the leading preventable cause of death in Massachusetts right now. And all the conditions that the clinical and observational research so far suggest these substances are effective in treating are life-threatening or debilitating. These include PTSD, these include depression, and these include opioid addiction, alcohol addiction, and addiction to tobacco as well. And OCD, something I suffer from. Nowhere in the world has legal access to these substances been observed to harm public health. And I'll elaborate on that. There's not a single study that has correlated legal access to these substances with any negative public health result when controlling for other variables. This measure, more or less identically, actually was a little bit more of a liberal measure in Colorado, passed in 2022. Since that time, impaired driving-related fatalities have fallen by 23.8%. The percentage of drug and alcohol-related hospitalizations related to hallucinogens, which actually encompasses many more substances than those in our bill, but they remained practically the same, still a tiny percentage, 0.27%, and remained considerably lower than they were in 2020. And the percentage of drug and alcohol-related arrests related to hallucinogens also went down in Colorado. In Oregon, they already have a legal therapeutic access program for one of the substances in our measure, psilocybin. As of September 3rd, 2024, they've administered over 12,000 doses, and only on 4 occasions have emergency services been called to respond. People should understand this is a measured policy in line with the evidence of what's happened in other countries and in other states. Here, one of the researchers on one of these studies, which showed that after psilocybin treatment for patients with cancer who had depression, 80% of participants showed a sustained response to the treatment, and 50% showed full remission of their depressive symptoms after 1 week, which was sustained for 2 months. Not a surprise that one of those researchers supports our measure. Over 71% of American psychiatrists in a recent poll support legalizing all of these substances, with the exception of Ibogaine. They weren't asked about Ibogaine, for medical use, and they were similarly a majority, around 57%. Let me check the number. Yes, 57%. Also said we should remove criminal penalties for personal use of all of these substances except for Ibogaine. They weren't asked about Ibogaine. So this is an evidence-backed policy. I brought a lot of the evidence to share with people here, over 5 pages in size 8 font, to bring more options to people who really, really, really need them. Nobody's going to be having 3 appointments for a recreational experience. There's no retail sales. Nobody's going to be forced to do psychedelics. We're going to support more research, but we think this will be a good thing for Massachusetts, especially for those people with the direst need, particularly our veterans who are suffering a suicide epidemic in this state, dozens in this state every year, and thousands every year across the country. So with that, I will give the floor to Ryan, who's here to give you the other side, and then we'll open it up to discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Doggy.
Doug loves clapping.
So, thank you for that, Graham. I did not bring any handouts. Try to keep it pretty basic and simple on this. And I'll speak to the studies and things as we go through. Just background on me, that was a great bio, thank you. So the reason I came into this was not, chasing a client or anything like that. I get paid in my other work. I had a friend that was involved in this and did some polling in the beginning to kind of see, what if it's something he might want to do, and he had me to take a look at it just to kind of give him some advice. And I read the ballot question. It was not first and foremost on my mind. And once I read it, I said, let me know what you need. I'm happy to help. I knew going into it that they weren't going to raise a lot of money. This is not you know, ballot questions are funny and they're difficult. There's not a lot of room for nuance in pushing a ballot campaign, and ballots are all nuanced. There's a reason they write them in a way that is incredibly confusing, and that's on purpose. People are hired and paid a lot of money to write ballot questions in a certain way to make it as confusing as possible, and then you can tell what you want to tell to explain that very bland headline that sounds nice. So I read it and I said, get me involved, because I do a lot of work in the recovery community. I have mental health issues in my family, and I do a lot of work with veterans and have veterans in my family, and I'll touch on each of those, and that is why I passionately want to get involved in this. I'll start out by saying that I have no problem with psychedelics. I think they do have promise. Studies, many were discredited, but some studies, and I even think the FDA originally said that there is promise, and I think there is. I don't think we know what that promise is yet. I don't think we know what the risk factors are yet. I don't think we know what the side effects are yet. I don't think we know what the effectiveness is yet. The FDA agrees. They did fast track 2 of the drugs along with MDMA. They've already ruled that the MDMA component that came to them first, the MDMA component for PTSD, they rejected that. It was quite a shock to a lot of people in the industry, because that was kind of supposed to be the canary in the coal mine for psychedelics getting into the mainstream. What they cited for rejecting that, which was a surprise to a lot of people in the industry, a potentially $7 billion industry, that's worth noting, is that the studies that are being pointed to and that were part of that campaign, are part of that campaign for that particular drug, were incredibly flawed, and that's a kind of a running trend throughout the documentation you read in support of this ballot question. Again, this is not to say that psilocybin in particular is something that should never be studied. In fact, I think this ballot question should have been written, and I'd be sitting on the other side of it, if this ballot question was to increase funding to study and figure out what exactly this does, what exactly this helps. I would never have touched the home growth aspect. We can talk about that shortly too. So the big thing is the studies that are being pointed to have been discredited by the majority of the scientific community. They've been pulled from Psychology Today, which was the leading publisher of them, which was brought to the FDA. They've been pulled down for a variety of reasons, ethical reasons, the fact that they didn't it's almost impossible to do a blind study when you're talking about psilocybin. People tend to know if they take mushrooms or they don't. It's pretty hard to say, hey, here's a placebo. I'm not tripping. So it's very difficult to do a study and figure out what works. It's also very well known in the industry, and this has been going back to the early 90s. Most researchers, most people that lead the studies are encouraged by the association. It's been pushing this. It's called MAPS since around 91. Is encouraged to take the mushrooms, to take the psilocybin, to understand kind of what the effects are, the heights it can bring you to. So there's this almost this, cult's the wrong word, but there's a movement among the researchers and the folks that take part in the research. I thought that was in here. As I said, it's a hell of a phone ring. There's a lot of bias that goes into it, which also skews the research quite a bit. Oftentimes, it's kind of the expectations that this is going to fix me leads to someone saying, I think I feel better, and that's how you get 60% of a study say, this worked, I'm better. It's very hard to show that this effect was based off of the psilocybin given. And that was basically what the FDA said in their rejection of MDMA, and it applies to the psilocybin studies as well. The other thing, if we're talking specific to the ballot question, again, I want to keep this about the ballot question, because we could have a whole discussion about psychedelics and their benefit to society. I think that's a good discussion. This ballot question, we're voting on language that's been written. The costs of this ballot question. First to the state. So Graham had mentioned Oregon and Colorado both passed this. Oregon's further ahead than Colorado. Colorado still hasn't done the regulations for the actual therapeutic use, even though it's not. It can't be called therapy in Colorado because it's not actually therapy, because medical professionals can't take part in it. But that's a whole other thing. Oregon has already moved forward. They've set up the regulatory structure, and they do have a therapeutic center open. Their structure was nearly bankrupt. Their agency that runs this was nearly bankrupt within 2 years and has already had been bailed out by the state and taxpayer funds because it was supposed to pay for itself. It clearly didn't. What concerns me on that is in Massachusetts, unlike in Oregon, we're developing a brand new agency based off this language in this ballot question. So think of the Cannabis Control Commission. You may have read about that recently. It's going really, really well. We're going to take that exact structure, that exact framework, which involves appointments by the governor, appointments by the treasurer, appointments by the attorney general, and then we're going to replicate that. That's going to be the new structure that deals with psychedelics. Each commissioner, I believe there's 5, is paid 75% of what the Administration of Finance Secretary makes. 100,000. They usually make around 160, 180. I used to work with them. They do quite well. I also was at one point in charge of appointing commissioners to the Cannabis Commission from the governor's office. I can say this because I'm not there anymore. It was the most political experience in my life, and I've been in politics my whole life. It did not matter who the person was, what their background was. It was you do this, I'll do this. You do this, I'll do this, between the treasurer, the attorney general, and the governor's office. It was all horse trading, and that's not going to change with this. So and if you want to know why the Cannabis Commission is the way it is today, it's because that was happening before I was there, that continued after I was there. That's why they all don't like each other, because they all play for different teams, and they were all appointed for different reasons, and it's 5 horses that don't run the same track. That's the same thing that's going to happen the way this is written in the Psychedelic Commission. So Oregon did it to an existing agency that was already funded and just added this component, and they went bankrupt. We're creating an entirely new agency. So do the math, what's that going to add to our state budget, which we have no problem adding to all the time, but it's going to take from somewhere. We do have to technically, legally balance our budget. That money to create that new agency, that another level of bureaucracy, is going to have to be paid for by us. On the consumer level, we talk about all the stuff, all the help this is going to give those with mental health, treatment for PTSD to veterans, end-of-life care for folks with cancer. If you go to the website, that's the first picture you see is a cancer patient. It doesn't say that implies it cures cancer. This cures a lot of things: smoking, drinking, end-of-life care, anxiety, PTSD. The list goes on, according to the campaign. So the average veteran is going to have to pay in Oregon. This is Oregon, and they say, and there's no way it's going to come down in price until the insurance covers it, which, by the way, does not and will not, because it's federally illegal. Insurance companies aren't going to touch this with a 10-foot pole. One session in Oregon is $3,000. One session. Wow. So find me. I have veterans in my family, and I can tell you right now, they are not going to be able to pay $3,000 for a session of tripping on shrooms that may or may not make them better. I'm not saying it couldn't eventually, but I think the smart approach is to study it, let's confirm what it does, let's confirm side effects, so at that point, we can get it covered at the federal level, thus get it covered by insurance, thus make this affordable for folks that need it. You know who does it in Oregon? Know who does it in Colorado? Wealthy tourists that want to come, and they call them, I wrote it down, it's a something trip. It's a cute little name. Tourists come, because in Colorado there's no framework yet for the regulatory body, right? So, but right when this passes, December 15th, mushroom psilocybin is legal. It's legal. You can grow it in your home in a 12 by 12 foot area. That's where you can grow your personal use mushrooms, 12 by 12 feet. That's a lot of mushrooms to eat, but you can't sell them. You can only give them away to friends.
Yeah, okay.
So know what they do there?
They sell them.
Come on by my apartment. I grow mushrooms. There's no licensing yet. Once it's licensed, you can fill out some paperwork, then you're licensed, because this is not a medical license. But right now, there's no licensing yet, which there'll be no licensing in Massachusetts for at least 2 years. We know how long it takes to develop regulations in Massachusetts. So what happens at that time, they call it the gray market. I sell mushrooms in my 12 by 12 foot area. I can't get in trouble for it, so I don't give a shit, who knows? And then I call my friends, or anyone, tell your friends, go on Instagram, come on by, I can give you mushrooms, up to 1 gram of mushrooms. I can give you more if no one knows, but legally I can give you up to 1 gram of mushrooms, and then charge you to guide you through my apartment. We'll take a walk down the park.
Tour.
Give me $500. You're not buying mushrooms, you're buying the tour from me, some guy who sells mushrooms. There's a person in Colorado currently who they're investigating, but they can't do anything. He's selling hugs. He sells the hug and gives you the mushrooms. You're paying for the hug. You're not paying for the mushrooms, he's giving you those. Legal. So to say that this is not making shrooms legal to purchase is to assume we live in a world where that wouldn't happen. And I don't live in that world. That would be like letting all of us brew our own beer, but we couldn't sell it. We can only give it away. More people are going to drink in my neighborhood if I'm giving away free beer. More people are going to take mushrooms. If I'm 18, I know you can't do it if you're not 21. I don't know how they're going to stop that because cops were told not to even Salem, they decriminalized it, and cops were literally told, I know the chief, do not look into it. Do not look into it. It's not worth it. It's not worth the paperwork. Just leave these people alone. So you think children, 18, 19, college kids, I mean, I was in college. You think they're not going to take shrooms if they're readily available? If they're being grown at their buddy's apartment down the street? They're going to. You mentioned the drunk driving stat. And you mentioned earlier in the beginning of the meeting, I was going to bring that up. It should be clear to everyone that that drunk driving stat had zero to do with psychedelics. It was a stat that coincided with the time the psychedelic passed. But that stat had everything to do with laws changing in Colorado based on drunk driving and enforcement. So I don't even know why that's part of this. That seems misleading. And that's another big point I want to make. Because I think it's important. It's what initially got me fairly passionate about this, which is an odd thing for me to be passionate about, admittedly. Veterans are a huge part of this campaign. The chairperson is a veteran. All the folks that testify, well, many of the folks that testify at the State House were veterans.
He's talking about our campaign, just to be
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Yeah, I apologize.
Our chair is a veteran.
Their
Their chair is an MGH doctor, which is also impressive. Doctors are important too.
And I love veterans.
Doctors.
Let me finish. This is no insult for veterans.
No, I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, believe me, this is no insult for veterans.
No, I wasn't trying to attack you. I just wanted to.
No, that's
I'm glad
fine.
you did that because I was confused.
Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry. The S on 5, the pro ballot question side, is heavy on veterans. It's a big part of their campaign. Because listen, I mean, very few people. You know, this is not the Vietnam days. There's very few people that aren't supportive of veterans. It's empathetic towards veterans. My wife didn't think I'd be here this long, sir. And I brought one quote. I didn't bring any paperwork. I brought one quote that blew my mind. So I mentioned this all kind of started with MDMA trials back in the late 90s. And psilocybin was part of that too. It was a company called, an organization called MAPS, the Mass Association for Psychedelic Support, something along those lines. The founder of that is, to this day, kind of thought of as kind of the leading charge in the psychedelic world. The guy's name is Dr. Rick Doblin. He's not actually a doctor. He has a PhD in political science, but he's Dr. Doblin. You can look him up. He's in all kinds of articles. He's an evangelical on psychedelics. He wants them to legalize. He believes that they can solve all kinds of world ills, etc. I'm just going to read the quote because it's something I can't even make up. He said on a podcast in 2021, speaking about his company and their role in the psychedelic revolution. They're the ones that actually created the corporate spinoff that did the application for the FDA to approve MDMA. So these guys are very, very, very involved. We don't actually do science, he said. We do political science. Dr. Doblin said of his work with MAPS in a 2021 podcast with activist Marianne Williamson. He described his organization's focus on veterans as a calculated public relations move. Quote, in this country, there's kind of a veneration of veterans, he said. So that's how I chose MDMA for PTSD. He said this, he said, what's the most sympathetic group I can use to try to get people to support my cause? I didn't say this, it was veterans.
Worked on me.
What's that?
It worked on me.
It worked on me until I read it, until I started looking into this, and I said, well, and that's why I say I support further study of psilocybin. I would be leading the charge in this ballot question if it meant it was more funding to study this and figure out what it actually does. What are the effects? What are the economic impacts of creating this agency? What's the best way to do it? Let's see what happens in Colorado and Oregon before we decide to dive in. I'm sure it works great in Netherlands. I've been to Amsterdam. I don't really want Amsterdam here. I don't think it's the safest place in the world. I think there's a lot of things you can do in Amsterdam, and I don't think they're all going to happen here. So I don't think it's a really very good comparison. I think this is too fast. I think it's ill-timed. I think it's putting the cart before the horse. I think the home growth aspect to it is unnecessary and it's almost a bridge too far. And I think that the writers of the ballot question kind of wish they didn't include that part if their goal is really to get help for the therapy side. And I think that the important thing is to try to get people to understand what this ballot question really is. We're not raising a ton of money on this because there's not a lot of businesses behind saying no to this. So it's going to have to be word of mouth, as much conversations as we can have in meetings like this. So that's my pitch. And I'm going to answer questions. Let me tell my wife I'm not dead. I'm just still at the meeting.
Do you want me to wait for you to do my? I want to do a little response. If that's okay.
No, of course. Yeah, this is so inappropriate.
No, but I also don't mind waiting for you if you want.
Yeah, no, wait for him to come back.
Yeah.
I want you to respond.
Yeah. No, I want him to be able to.
Does anybody have any questions for Graham?
Well, I got some questions.
I mean, I'm going to answer. You answer.
Yeah.
No, there's no reason. If I answer a question I was going to answer, it'll be fine.
He's back.
Sorry, guys. Sorry about that.
Okay. I read this thing over.
Yeah.
To me, it looked like there's a lot of corruption in here on the statewide with these committees. I'm going to start off with the DWI you mentioned went down
3.8% in Colorado. Yeah.
I don't know what country that was, but when I was in Europe, there was a couple of countries we went into, and they told us if you get caught under the influence and you have an accident, the insurance company that you take out with the rental car company does not pay it. You have to pay it. So they also put that in for the residents. And when they put that in, a lot of people stopped driving drunk. They had a designated driver because if they got in an accident, not only what they pay for their car, the other car, and all the medical bills. So that put a damper on drinking and driving. I read about here 5 people on a committee. I'll tell you about another committee that was started in the state several years ago, maybe probably 10 years ago. They had a utility committee. And basically one person had to have expertise in electricity. Another one was in gas, another one was in cable, and they had 2 political appointees. They were paid $90,000 for the chairman, and it was $80,000 for each of the members. There was no set hours that they had to work. All they had was required was to attend 2 meetings a month. And over the last 8 years, I never even heard of this committee on the news or what they've done. What I know is we're paying over $250,000 to support this committee, and that's gone up.
It actually says in there, in that ballot, the whole text is in there. It says the makeup of the committee and what he was paid.
Right, but it says 75%
of the ANF secretary.
Right, and then
yeah.
And you're saying 100,000. So you're talking.
Well, the ANF secretary typically gets paid between. They always get paid less than the governor, so they're typically between 140 and 160.
That's still a lot of money.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
Right, and there's 5 of them. And plus, one gets 100% because he's the committee.
And they have staff as well.
Right.
Paid staff. Yeah.
Right. And it's just, and then again, it's against federal law. And I'm military retired, so I believe in federal law. Also, this town has had a state police officer who was killed by a person who was using marijuana, I believe, on Route 90 over by Sturbridge. So I'm against the marijuana district in here. I brought up at a town meeting one time when I asked them, I said, since the medical cure, do they require a pharmacist? And I was told not to question the law because it's against the state law to say that you are against it because it's against federal law. And I have that at home in writing if somebody wants to see it. So there's a lot of things that I'm against this thing, and I can't see voting for it, to be honest with you.
I mean, I hear all your concerns. I'm not going to argue that this bill is perfect. However, a lot is a lot of how this is going to work out is going to be an implementation.
Well, the other thing is on the 12 by 12 foot area, right? Now, I get mushrooms growing in my yard every once in a while. Because
Don't eat those ones.
No, I usually save for my lawnmower, okay? But those mushrooms are carried, the seeds are carried by insects. And so you can't legislate that you're only gonna grow mushrooms here because insects will move them for you.
That's one of the reasons actually the Veterans Association is going to endorse this, because it's been proven they're deadly for pets. Cover
Right.
your ears, buddy. They're deadly for pets, and the only regulations on the home growth is needs to be secure from children. I think it says children and pets, but there's no way to ensure that.
Right.
And you're correct. The window's open, the spores can blow. You never. I mean, I'm not an agriculturalist.
Neither am I.
I don't think it's a good thing for pets to be eating.
I used to haul
psilocybin
copper for
spores.
the government, so I've gone all over the world.
Yeah.
But, you know, and then I just think this is a lot of money. And if they're gonna be doing drugs, there should be a pharmacist involved and a medical doctor. And that's my personal opinion, so I'm against this article.
Well, when marijuana came into this, the state, it was medical marijuana. You needed to get a doctor's prescription to use it. How many people actually went and got a doctor's prescription to use marijuana? They bought it off the street.
And then how many of them?
So how many people are gonna buy mushrooms off the street?
Well, you can't buy them. They can only be given to you. You buy the hug.
So I don't know. I don't know. If you finish your point, but I'd love to be able to answer some of these questions because I've got Ryan and you and.
Well, the other thing is, like she brought up, how many of them got pharmacists? If they're gonna do marijuana, if this is a drug for curing things, shouldn't it require a pharmacist to be involved?
Well, that will be up to the expert advisory board, which is unpaid. So there's 5 paid commissioners. However, there's also a 15-member expert advisory board, which is required by law to have a mental health expert and an emergency medical services expert on it. They'll determine the rules and regulations for this care within a 2-year implementation period. So to your point about where are they getting paid to do, the first licenses for administering this care by law have to go out in 2026. So they can't indefinitely draw this out and twiddle their thumbs and not get anything done. And obviously the intention is for this program to be self-sustaining, which Ryan is correct, it's not in Oregon, but we can do things better in Massachusetts. And I hope they will, and a lot of this is going to come down to what happens the day after, assuming this passes. I'm sticking around in this state, I really care about this, I'm gonna do my best to make sure this works. But I wanna address sort of there's a lot of stuff here. So, just a small point. The MDMA stuff, MDMA is not in our measure. And it's not true that MAPS or Rick Doblin have been driving all of this research into these substances or involved at all in a lot of it. So there's a big difference between MDMA and psilocybin in terms of how the research was advanced. Ryan is correct about how the research was advanced for MDMA largely. There have been some independent studies of MDMA. There's a recent study that the VA did. The results are not yet published, but apparently they were very good. But we're getting lost in the weeds. MDMA is not in our measure, and Rick Doblin did not drive psilocybin research. What makes these unique is that all the research on all these substances has been very decentralized. So Johns Hopkins was the institution, Johns Hopkins Medical School, was the central institution driving psilocybin research in the last 2 decades, not MAPS, Johns Hopkins. Now, if it was just Johns Hopkins, maybe you'd say, well, maybe Johns Hopkins went nuts. But it's also Stanford that's done research. It's also the Imperial College in London. It's also now the University of Arizona. There's all sorts of psilocybin studies being done all across the country and all across the world. It's not being advanced by a single pharmaceutical company or a single institution, which is one reason you can have more confidence in these results relative to the MDMA results. So there's no connection. No is a strong word, but like Rick Doblin, of course, is for this, but he did not play a direct role in this research. And you can look this up. I encourage everybody to do their own research. I provided citations. Also, when Ryan said this research has been discredited, that's not true. I mean, the articles that were withdrawn pertained to MDMA. Psilocybin is still anticipated to be FDA approved in 3 years. Compass Pathways, the company advancing that, has not been accused of the same ethical issues as MAPS. It's just completely irrelevant. I'm trying to address other things. People brought up the mushrooms at home. As Ryan pointed out, in Salem, you can already grow as many mushrooms as you want. So I think a really important thing to put out here is that, yes, people illegally purchase mushrooms in Massachusetts today. And in addition to that, in 8 localities in Massachusetts encompassing over 390,000 residents, they already effectively can legally grow as much as they want. So 8 localities passed decriminalization measures pertaining to psilocybin. In Salem, it's just psilocybin, and all the rest, it's all of these substances. And in every locality except for Amherst, there's no restrictions, no 12 by 12, no need to secure it from people under age 21, no restrictions whatsoever, including my city of Cambridge since 2021, and the city of Somerville since 2021. So I think a really important thing for people to know at home and in this room is that there's not a single place that Ryan or the opposition can point to and say this was a disaster. He can't say, oh, in Salem, there was this crazy explosion of the black market once his friend said we're no longer prosecuting even kids for using this. I do not think kids under 21 should use it.
It was the mayor and the police chief.
Sorry.
The mayor and the police chief were the friends.
Okay,
yeah.
So they stopped, not me, by the way. I'm not in Salem. They were the ones who stopped prosecuting even kids for using this. I don't support, like, to me, that's not good, to be clear. People under 21 should not be using this. And we haven't seen any problems in Massachusetts. Like, I spoke to a researcher who'd been looking into the public health impacts of these measures in 8 cities. And he said, there's nothing there. And again, I encourage Ryan should. Your team should definitely look into it and try to find a statistic, but I don't think you'll find one.
The statistics of what? I like
of how the
measures,
how did the 8 localities, like Salem passes that decrim measure, did something bad happen that you can link to the measure passing? You know, Cambridge passed a decrim measure, like maybe you are hearing about bad things.
No, I've read a lot of it because it's a larger scale. It's specifically from Colorado that passed basically the same exact law about 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, 2022.
So you can look at Colorado Public Radio, National Public Radio out of Colorado. There's several articles that talk about a gray market that exploded, that mushroom use among adolescents and of age has exploded. Illicit. It's called the gray market. It's taken over. It's being sold. If you Google mushrooms for sale in the state of Colorado, there's pages of opportunities for you, pay over crypto, meet here, pay in cash. They're not afraid of getting in trouble. So the black market, they call it the gray market, I think it's just a clever term, has exploded. And that's fact. And that can be very easily found with 5 keystrokes on a computer. You can read all the articles about what's happened after this exact bill has been passed. Salem didn't pass this bill.
Salem did decriminalize, to your point, use of these substances and growing of these substances without restriction.
Salem
Audubon or Salem, Massachusetts. So here's are the cities.
It was early this summer.
Salem was last year. Somerville was 2021. So here are the cities where this very scary thing. I mean, again, I'm being sarcastic because I don't think it's scary, but these are the cities all across the state where there's no restrictions on home grow, except for Amherst, where the limit is 5 grams, which is a lot, to be clear. So these are the cities. So
no limit, what did you say? There's no limit on home growth except for Amherst, which is 5 grams?
Yeah.
Okay,
5 grams is the limit in Amherst.
To grow?
To grow. For everything in Amherst. Amherst also decriminalized all drugs, which our thing does not do. So the cities are Cambridge, Somerville, Medford. Medford's very recent. Salem, Northampton, East Hampton, I think we're at 6, Amherst 7, Provincetown 8. So geographically, you're across the whole state here. And to Ryan's point, if this home grow was such an issue, any one of those cities, Cambridge right next to Boston, like, again, I hear the concern. It's a valid concern. But in terms of a negative public health impact, even in Colorado, so anecdotally, sure, you can Google and you can see people are selling this. People are selling it here too, illegally, and they'll continue to be illegal once this passes. But In Colorado, if you look at the hospitalization stats, the public health stats, the arrest stats, and again, I read the driving thing's not causal, but the driving thing, there's just no evidence that it has caused problems. And he mentions Amsterdam. Amsterdam is one city in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is a bunch of cities. It's a big country, and it's not just the Netherlands. So the Netherlands has buying and selling in stores. We're not having that here. But in Austria, they decriminalized personal use and growing of these mushrooms, I think, in 2016. In Jamaica, this is also, well, they actually have buying and selling in Jamaica. In the Bahamas, personal use is decriminalized. There's a few other places, they're sort of obscure, but the point being is this is available in a lot of different countries, and Ryan can't point to any country where this has been an issue. And again, I hear the theoretical concerns,
I
but
pointed to Colorado, that's a state.
Well, you're pointing out that people are, as they are in this state, buying it illegally, and yes, they're not being...
The quote was, a gray market has exploded by the liberal radio station and newspaper in Colorado.
That's a quote.
Who supported the ballot question.
I understand, but I'm saying that that's still anecdotal, and I
by
believe...
someone in that state, not someone who's pushing the ballot question in Massachusetts.
I know, but if you look nationally...
Let him finish.
Okay, I'm sorry.
If you look nationally, psychedelics use is increasing across the country. And as long as this research continues to come out, people who have very serious issues are going to continue to seek out this treatment, either in the underground, which is risky, which is why we want regulation in this state, or they're going to go abroad. And Ryan talks about price. It's far more expensive to go abroad to access this than it is to access it here. The other thing he talks about is making it FDA approved, so it's covered by insurance. The way new treatments get covered by insurance, it's not an automatic process. So for example, I was taking care of a loved one with severe depression. Ketamine is not in our measure, and ketamine is an addictive substance, but ketamine, IV ketamine for suicidality, which is evidence-backed, for people who want it for medical purposes, remains prohibitively expensive. So for my loved one, ketamine treatment was a life-saving treatment that her doctor prescribed. However, her insurance didn't cover it because she arbitrarily hadn't met their criteria for being treatment resistant. So she's out on that ketamine for like $3,000. It's like $600 an infusion. In Australia, where psilocybin is FDA approved, or sorry, not FDA approved, Australia, whatever, equivalent approved, the treatment costs around $25,000 and isn't covered by insurance. And also, it's still expensive in Oregon, but Ryan did exaggerate the price. It hovers more towards $1,500 to $1,800, but there are places offering it much cheaper. I spoke to one of the places that offers it for around $1,000. But anyway, we're getting lost in the weeds here. This will definitely make it more available in a safe and regulated environment than it is now. So the default is it's very inaccessible, or you have to do it illegally and it's risky. This will make it more available, and hopefully we can create a system that makes it affordable for those people who need it. In terms of veterans not being able to afford it, one of the organizations supporting our measure is an organization called Heroic Hearts, which I recommend everybody look up, which was founded and is led by an Army Ranger combat veteran, Jesse Gould. You can look him up. He's the person to think of with our measure, not Rick Doblin. Gould's the one writing in the New York Times about how ayahuasca, one of the substances that will be included here, saved his life. His organization sponsors veterans. It's a nonprofit that sponsors veterans to access this care legally abroad. They want to be able to let veterans have this care here, ideally for cheaper. So I'm trying to think about more just to addressing different things. So the cost to state, it's a concern, but again, hopefully we'll do better here than in Oregon. The MDMA is not on our measure. Rick Doblin's, he's a guy, he's not involved with the research. The psilocybin research has not been discredited. Johns Hopkins is the main org, but there's lots of institutions looking into it. And the selling. I said Colorado's bill was more liberal, and that is true. So Colorado's bill explicitly legalized the gray market. Our bill did not.
Can you explain that so I can understand, though? Because I read the
No, I can. And Ryan, I really appreciate this has been a really good faith discussion, and I think you might have been mistaken about some points, but you seem like a good guy. So Colorado actually explicitly legalized the gray market. Their bill actually said it's legal to get remuneration for services around the substances. Like, that's explicit in the bill, baked into the thing that the voters passed. Ours does not. So ours explicitly says it is illegal to offer this in association with any business activity and for any kind of remuneration. So it will be up to the discretion of people like Ryan's friends in law enforcement as to whether they enforce that, the hugs for mushrooms thing. But that will technically be illegal under this bill. It says no, not in association with any business activity, not for any remuneration. So if I'm offering hugs and and I'm getting paid for the hugs and giving you mushrooms, I think a judge can look at that and say, buddy, this looks like you're being remunerated, or this looks like this is an association with a business activity. Colorado explicitly said that's okay. And the idea here was that there were, I think, indigenous practitioners or politically influential gray market practitioners who wanted to be in business right away. We're not doing that here. And again, it will be at the discretion of law enforcement to enforce the law as written, but the law says no mushrooms in association with business activity. Yes?
I was going to say, so to Ryan's point, to allow it to allow people to grow and possess it, doesn't that open up potentially open up a Pandora's box that once it's open is really difficult to bring back?
Of course it does.
Yes, I mean, yes,
but
you say Pandora's box, you're implying something bad's going to happen that's never happened anywhere.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, why have that in the bill? To Ryan's point.
To Ryan's point?
Because I actually think that there's a lot of evidence medically it could help a lot of different issues that people are having, and I'm fully supportive, like just what Ryan is saying, like fully supportive. Like I think that there's a lot of really good use cases, but there does seem to be some language in there that's like, well, why would that be in there if it's specifically geared towards treating medical ailments?
Because we don't think people in principle should be prosecuted for trying to heal, and also we don't think this is a good use of law enforcement resources to prosecute activity that's not commercial. And just personal use.
So it's a libertarian point of view, kind of like to kind of start the legalization process for most drugs is kind of what it sounds like.
I mean, if you look at the research, which I cite here, I mean, there's only one bullet point. It says observational research suggests personal use of psychedelics is more beneficial than harmful. If you go to footnote 26 or whatever, you see here it's like improvement in OCD symptoms associated with serotogenic psychedelics. Change in burnout measures in emergency medical services. This is all researching the personal use, and it's seeing all these good things. So whatever your feelings, people are already doing this. Is it worth law enforcement's time if somebody's not buying and selling, if somebody has this in their house, to devote resources to cracking down on this? It's not an issue right now. In 8 cities in Massachusetts, it's already a reality. And not again, geographically, Medford, Cambridge, Salem, Somerville, all around Boston, you know, and then you have Provincetown out in the Cape, you have East Hampton and Northampton. The Pandora's box has already been opened in Massachusetts, and it's more permissible.
Doesn't make it right.
Can I just respond? Can I respond to Graham real quick?
Sure, real quick.
It was called misinformed, so I
No,
got up in my chair a little.
yeah.
No, quick question, just so I don't forget it. When you said the difference between Colorado and Massachusetts, is Colorado allowed the remuneration of
Yes.
services, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes.
So should I take that to assume that these therapeutic centers are going to be free in Massachusetts?
What do you mean free?
Well, don't they have to charge someone?
There's an explicit carve out for the licensed care. So this bill prohibits retail sales.
But there is no license yet. So what happens between December 15th and when the licensed therapy center is open, which is what's happening in Colorado as we speak? What is the rule between December 15th, when this passes in your world, and when the licensed centers are open? Because right now, December 15th, everything else in that bill is in effect. There's no late date. There's no go back to the legislature, discuss. December 15th, as the law is written, that day, everything else in the bill is full. Let's go, open the door. So what happens in those 2 years?
So there really is a difference between having retail stores in every street
No.
corner.
What's the difference in those 2 years? You said that no remuneration can be done, right? So I can't say so in that time, I can't say I'm giving my friend mushrooms and I'm taking for a tour and I'm charging for the tour.
Yeah, that would be prosecutable under
It
the
doesn't
law.
say that in Massachusetts.
It does. It says so. Can I borrow this?
There's a lack of the clarification of remuneration. You know what I mean? A lack of saying it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It doesn't explicitly say you cannot.
It doesn't say you cannot. Hold on one second. Let's
Right?
go.
It doesn't say you cannot. So by definition, that means it's gray. Thus the gray market.
I'm trying to find the text here.
Well, because you said specifically to me when I was uninformed, that was your example. I just wanted you to.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Not even pretty sure. I know there's a section here that says that
I've been here for 3 hours. I got all night. We can wait.
No. So let's This is worth it. Where's
I'm
the
retired soon if I buy my
where's
wife.
the remuneration?
John Weston, do you have something to say? A question?
Well, I do. First of all, there's some terminology here that I take a lot of issue with. This is not a cure for anything. This is not healing anything. I'm going to ask everybody in this room, did you ever get drunk one time because you had a bad day?
Just once?
Just once? Did you, when you had the hangover the next day, did you still have the problems? You did, didn't you? Okay. So what I'm taking from this, okay, and just like with the whole pot, and, you know, oh, it's medical. Come on. It's the whole idea is when you're stoned or you're messed up, you don't have your problems until you come back to reality. So why don't we spend money and research on how to fix the problems that these people have versus masking them with the proper term right here that you call it psychological, psychedelics, whatever the word is. This is crazy. It's only going to open up a thing. Okay, one thing that hasn't been talked about here is who's going to sell it? Who's going to make the money from it?
The people that come in after.
There you go.
The people who are licensed, and intentionally this is set up, there's a limit
Who's
on the
going to
amount
sell
of
it and who's,
businesses.
but I don't want to hear this, they're going to be a licensing thing.
But there is.
I'm going to use an example. Well, we were told when the pot came through, there was only going to be 3 licenses in the city of Worcester. Now there are more pot stores than there are full liquor stores in the city of Worcester.
Cannabis is a very different substance.
It isn't. It's the same scenario.
Okay. I just want to, for everybody watching this at home, you can reach out to us. Again, like there's actual evidence here. Like this is not, you have to take my word for anything. Look up the epidemiology, I think it's, you know, of psychedelics use in the Netherlands, right? In the Netherlands, this has been...
I don't care what other countries do.
Yeah.
Well, then look it
I
up.
care what we do right here.
Then look up in the U.S., it's estimated that less than 5% of people use psilocybin.
Only 3 states
now.
decriminalized it.
I know, but you
So
could
it's
look
gonna
at,
be-
but
it's
if you
gonna be
look
low
at,
reporting
but
in
if you
3
look
states.
at cannabis has always been a drug of abuse. It's always been a habit
Have
forming.
you ever
Drugs have
taken
always done
mushrooms?
that.
I'll say I've taken mushrooms.
I've taken mushrooms too, and
I
I
think a lot of people
healed
take
from
mushrooms
it.
in college. I could find them when I needed them.
How did you heal from it? How did you
one
heal
buy
yourself from
in the
when you
grocery
mask
store.
a problem and you wake up the next day or you come back to reality? How do you heal?
I healed because I woke up the next day and the problems were gone. I mean, the thing is, my OCD
What?
was so... Well,
Oh, John,
that's why I'm
John.
for this. That's why I'm for this.
Let's,
I
before you do
I
that,
was
hold-
scared of the
yeah.
walls in my house. I had severe obsessive compulsive disorder. It's not something a lot of people know what that looks like, okay? But I was scared of the walls in my house. I was scared of taking a deep breath because I was worried about, you know, all the different contaminants in the air. I was worried about, what else? I mean, there's a lot of the stuff is so nuts that I don't even want to go into it because it'll make me look like a crazy person, which I was until I used mushrooms. No, seriously, because the stuff, OCD is a really awful disease. It's repetitive thoughts. You think you're a bad person all the time. Okay, I'll be real here with you guys. Oh, this won't discredit me too much, but like before mushrooms, okay, I used to not be able to take a walk without every 2 seconds looking for worms to save. It's totally crazy, right? I had this compulsion. I thought God wanted me to save worms.
You mean that's crazy? I do that.
Well, this was literally every second, so I couldn't take a walk. I couldn't even imagine being able to take a walk without thinking about worms. Now I don't think about it at all. I mean, I think about it 0%. And I had an experience with psilocybin mushroom, a small amount, where I woke up the next day and my symptoms were reduced 90%. Now, did they stay 90% reduced? No, they came back a little bit. But little by little, using psilocybin, I did heal. And I used psilocybin in consultation with my psychiatrist at Massachusetts General Hospital, the #1 ranked psychiatric hospital in the country. McLean is #2. I have a family member who's a psychiatrist. I have friends who are medical doctors. You can look at all this research and say it's BS, but that's not the Occam's razor explanation for the fact every time they test psilocybin for some new condition, it seems to work. And for people saying it's just placebo, I would ask, why doesn't the placebo effect kick in on medication #1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I know somebody at McLean Hospital, the #2 ranked psychiatric hospital in the entire country in our state of Massachusetts. She has been there nearly a year. She's on 15 meds. And she's having to make a pros and cons list for whether to drink water. I used to be that bad. I'm not anymore because I was in the city of Cambridge, which I knew wouldn't prosecute me for doing something that didn't harm anyone, that helped me in the eyes of my family, my psychologist, who I continue to see once a week, and my psychiatrist. I'm the subject of research at the University of Arizona. To me, this is a very, very easy case, and I am concerned about public health. I know somebody with bipolar who should not do these substances. I had a friend with schizophrenia. I am not somebody who wants to worsen mental health in Massachusetts, but I've been assured by the evidence when you look at not just the Netherlands, but Brazil, Costa Rica, Mexico, nowhere. I mean, yes, so maybe in Colorado more people are doing mushrooms, but if it's not causing any problems, what's the issue? Yeah.
What are the side effects?
They don't know.
That's not, I mean, look.
No, well, I'm just asking, and I'm not asking like in like a bad way, but like I suffer of anxiety and depression, and I take medicine every day for it that has a lot of side effects. And as a matter of fact, when I started taking it, I had to see my psychiatrist more often because there was the possibility of me having suicidal thoughts that I had never had before. And so what I'm saying, the reason why I'm saying this is because there is a lot of stuff that is already being prescribed, right? And that is being controlled by the medical industry. And so I, as a matter of fact, wanted to ask also, I think one of the things that happened in the country with weed, which is not relatable to this, but in terms of safety for kids and adults, is that because there was regulation, the amount of black market use lowered, and I was wondering if that's something that could happen in this
and I want to wind myself down. I apologize to everybody. So in terms of the side effects, saying that's not true, look, for some of these substances, not psilocybin, okay, the clinical evidence is preliminary. If you combine it with the observational evidence and the public health data, it's clear that from a public health perspective, these things are very safe. I'm not saying that people should stop doing the research. The question is, should people be prosecuted for making the choice? And when we have such a clear need, when the existing treatments are so obviously insufficient, when we look at the overdoses, when we look at the suicides, should people have an additional option that in controlled environments is clearly effective? I mean, again, you can quibble with here and there. Ryan mentioned functional unblinding. You can't blind meth either. That's a prescription medication, okay? Multiple psychiatric meds have been FDA approved despite not being able to blind them. Yeah, methamphetamine is a prescription medication for ADHD. Adderall is a prescription medication for ADHD, which also is a drug of abuse, addictive, unlike these substances. Xanax, benzodiazepines, addictive, can't blind them. So this is not a new problem with psychedelics, and there were issues with the MDMA trials that are gone here. But let's open it up to questions. Yeah.
I want to get.
I have to.
Hold on.
He's talking to me. I just need to clarify.
I thought you were answering my question.
Hold on. John down here in the corner has been extremely patient.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to rewind half an hour ago. You were talking about the eight cities, Graham, that have used it, and I thought that was an interesting point because you're saying, there aren't all these horrible things happening. So can we flip it and say, are there any great things happening? Are you able to say, oh, in those cities, depression is so low, suicide is so low, nobody has ADHD, nobody has compulsive disorder. Is that the case? Or are you going to say, oh, no, because there's no study been done on that?
No, I'm not going to say there's no study been done on that. So the bottom line is, when I say these substances are non-addictive, I really mean it. And they're not also straightforwardly recreational either. One of the substances in our measure has basically no recreational value. Ibogaine, it's a terrible experience. People only do that when they're really desperate. Yesterday at a campaign event, I met somebody struggling with drug addiction right now who wants to do Ibogaine because he's at the end of his rope, his marriage is falling apart. But he's read about how Ibogaine, which again is a prescription medication in New Zealand, is used for substance abuse. So these are not really fun drugs. People talk about bad trips, they're context sensitive. This is not like heroin, this is not like cannabis, this is not like alcohol. So the answer to your question is, I've looked into it, and there's nothing. The public health impact of this worldwide is nothing.
I think
nothing
good.
Nothing
Positive.
No, and I know, and you're not, and we don't see that. I think the issue is
so
that
if you don't see the positive, why would you expect to see the negative? Because you have, what was one of the towns? Marlborough? Was that one of them? So big Medford, you know, fairly big, a lot of people. So what percentage of them are actually taking the mushrooms, right? So it's a small, so if there's a couple extra driving accidents or so, it's lost in the statistics. You really need to do a focused study on just what are the, you know, what's happening to the people taking these.
Mm-hmm.
Are they having more violent acts? Are they having more traffic?
So to your point, that research has been done. So there has been research on people who use these substances, both in the clinical trials and observationally. And again, overwhelmingly, those studies showed that people who use these tend to be less, less healthier, basically. So let me see, if we go to, I think it's citation number 26, here we go. So naturalistic use of mescaline, that means personal use of mescaline, is associated with self-reported psychiatric improvements, enduring positive life changes. Then you have, where is this? Naturalistic psilocybin use is associated with persisting improvements in mental health and well-being, results from longitudinal study. And then you're saying, okay, these are self-reporting, but there was also a big population study. Here we go. Psychedelics not linked to mental health problems or suicidal behavior, a population study. So yes, the population of people using this stuff has been looked at. The research indicates it does help people. It doesn't mean nobody's ever gotten hurt. People get hurt from all sorts of things, but yeah.
Yeah, they've looked at it for positive, but have they looked at it for the negative?
Oh yeah, no, the whole,
Yeah.
I think the researchers were surprised when they looked at this population study of people using psychedelics and didn't find any correlation with anything negative. So that they've looked. In fact, there was a recent observational study that looked explicitly at psychedelics use in psychosis. Because there's this fear, and it is, look, anybody with a psychotic disorder has to be careful and should not be using recreational drugs, because psychosis is a disaster. However, this study was done of people using psychedelics, including people with psychosis, and what it found in this observational study was the people with psychotic disorders who used psychedelics, this is self-reported with all the limitations, had reported less psychotic symptoms than the people who didn't use them. Now again, that might be the people who are healthier using psychedelics, whatever. But the point being is, yes, they've looked for downsides to this. They haven't found it. And it doesn't mean nobody gets hurt, but I would say that yes, so the public health impact is minimal. The use is very small, even in Colorado still. When looking at the actual populations who use this, it seems to be beneficial for them. And as Ryan said, veterans are actively advocating for this. And in fact, there are veteran-led nonprofits helping people get access to this care. Yes.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Greg has been one doing, he hasn't spoken, so let's hear from Greg.
Yeah.
Okay. Why the hell do we need it? From what I'm hearing from you is people are accessing this now from doctors and whatever. Why not just make it that if they've got a prescription, it's there? Why do we need a whole damn bureaucracy like the Cannabis Control Commission and that?
Well, because FDA approval of only one of the substances is going to happen in like 3 years. In the meantime, people are accessing it.
I want to say, they said the same exact thing about MDMA, and they were shocked when it didn't happen. So let's not get ahead of ourselves and say it's going to happen.
Well, then it's even more important for
let me
this measure
finish,
to pass.
please.
But yeah.
Okay. What we're doing here is, why do we need it? Is it to get it so that everybody can pay through insurance? Everybody pays for insurance. If you need it and it's prescription, then provide a way to get it, then fine. We don't need the rest of this stuff.
Claire.
My whole thing is this. You're saying that minors can't be prescribed this, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, you're supposed to be 21 to drink. How many minors get alcohol? You're supposed to be 18 or older to smoke a cigarette. How many 15-year-olds smoke a cigarette because they get cigarettes from their parents? I mean, this is going to be...
But again, it's already, I guess this is already here. So I'm not airdropping mushrooms across the state, and this measure does not advocate for that. In 8 cities and towns in Massachusetts, as Ryan said, they're already not arresting teenagers.
I got a question. Can you right now walk into Cambridge and get mushrooms?
No.
Buy and sell, or get somebody give it away?
No, and that's one thing.
What is not regulated in Cambridge and 7 other cities?
What's not regulated? If you grow in your house, law enforcement won't arrest you. I mean, this is legally they can, but to Ryan's point,
okay, so if you grow in your house in Cambridge, and I'm looking at grown mushrooms.
Yeah.
what can I give them to my friends?
Yes.
Can I
Yes.
sell them?
In Salem and in Medford. You can't sell them. No selling. Yes.
Okay, but I can give them away.
You can.
So, why are
You
we
can.
stopping? Local towns right now can pass ordinances, and everybody can grow them, and the stuff will be available, and
The,
There you
the,
go.
the issue is now the regulated, the therapy component. So what Cambridge can't do is they can't license people to watch somebody while they're having this experience. They can't license people to administer it in a controlled environment. So the thing is, this is really important. This is getting really in the weeds, but the existing laws right now across the state don't really do much of a good job restricting home cultivation. So let me tell you something right now. Mescaline-containing cactus, San Pedro cactus, already federally legal. You can already right now, any state any city in the state, you can have as many of these cactus as you want. They all contain mescaline, one of the things in our measure. Okay, cacti, whatever. And then, no, I'm not being dismissive of that. The cacti, no. So the correction, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be snippy about that. That doesn't matter. Similarly, one of the plants that contains DMT is also federally legal. So you can already grow that in your house right now. The spores to grow mushrooms, already federally legal. You can go to Amazon and order these mushroom spores to your house. Illegal to grow them, not legal to have the spores. Okay, so the thing is, if this were going to be a problem, we'd already see it being a problem. As for why this is important, this isn't important for the recreational user. These things don't show up on drug tests. The recreational user, the stupid kid, they're going to do it anyway. That's not good. But the point being is for people who want to use this for therapeutic purposes, this empowers them to have honest conversations with their healthcare providers. This encourages them to have honest conversations with their loved ones. And it provides a safe, regulated space for them to use this in an intentionally therapeutic setting. So certain people are more vulnerable than others. So let me give you an example of how this can be helpful, right? You can take psilocybin because you have an alcohol drinking problem, right? You might take the psilocybin, and then you lose your desire to drink temporarily. This integration session that's mandated by law, where you have to come back and talk about that and have a plan, that's going to help that person not get into their bad habits and pick up the bottle again once the psilocybin starts to not be as strong. So this regulated environment is going to make it easier for people who want to access this therapeutically to do it the right way. It's going to create a model of responsible use. The existing laws don't do a good job prohibiting recreational use, and this is not about recreational use. This is about fairness, this is about common sense, this is about compassion. This is about not wasting time persecuting people who are trying to heal. Yes.
We gotta
Chuck,
wrap it up here.
Chuck,
so-
I gotta
Yeah,
get
sorry,
something.
yeah.
I gotta get something. I'm sorry. So,
Let Ryan get
Mass
it.
Medical Association
Yeah.
came out against this. They support the no side. What?
The Mass Medical Association supports the no side. They support the decrim.
Yes, they do.
They support
Know
the
why
decrim.
they support the no side? Because they think that all of these studies have shown nothing. The Mass Medical Association, there's an entire paper, you can read it on their website. They go line by line how the studies have proven nothing. They believe there's a lot more side effects that could potentially be there. They would like further, exactly what I'm saying, they would like further study. In addition, you said, and I don't want to get personal with you, but you told a personal story.
No,
You
it's
said
fine,
you
it's
took
all fair
psilocybin in consultation with your therapist. It must have been after hours? Because they would be delicensed.
No, they weren't there, but I'm allowed to talk to my healthcare provider about whatever I
Because the
want.
implication a lot is this is a therapist-driven session. No licensed therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist can take part in this, or they will, as currently stands, even once this is decriminalized, they will lose their license.
That's not true.
That is absolutely true. That is true in Colorado. That is true.
No.
That is true
So
in
in
Oregon. That's true in
Oregon,
Colorado.
in Oregon, there
Are you
is
going
a-
to interrupt me, Chuck?
Sorry. I'm
No,
not interrupting.
I'm telling him, you get, you know.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
apologize.
I couldn't tell where you were pointing.
Yeah.
I would just say that, as written, psychiatrists cannot take part in it. That's also according to the Massachusetts Association of Psychiatrists, who are writing a statement in support of us, and the Mass Medical Association, just to name two, who have discussed what I discussed in much more detail. If you want to look at the Mass Medical Association's website, and you want to look at it's a one-page statement going through the studies that have been done, they say right in there, we support the decriminalization of psychedelics and other drugs because they are for equity and they don't want people to be prosecuted in mental health. A variety of reasons that I agree with. They say in their next paragraph, however, the way this bill is drafted, this question is drafted, it puts far too much credence into studies that are fundamentally flawed and have been pointed out to be fundamentally flawed by all independent research of it, outside entities. And I would recommend following these footnotes, there's plenty in here, type the footnotes into your computer, and go back and see who funded these studies. Always follow the money. Anytime you have a question, the answer is money. Follow the money, see who funded these studies. They'll lead back. And one final thing.
Yeah.
You said Dr. Dobbins, and I hate bringing him up, but he makes my skin crawl reading about him and what he's done and the way he's using a group. He's using veterans for his own personal causes for a $7 billion industry. You said he's not even part of this, he has nothing to do with it. 2 weeks ago, there was an article in the New York Times, and I quote, this guy was invited to a dinner in Cambridge, of all places. And Rick Dobbin was the featured guest over the speakerphone. Founder and president of the nonprofit Multidisciplinary Associated Psychedelic Studies, which launched Lykos, its for-profit arm 10 years ago, and is arguably the most prominent face of the current renaissance of psychedelics. That's the New York Times a week ago, not me.
I mean, you can also read in the New York Times about Roland Griffiths and Matthew Johnson, all these other people involved in the research.
Okay. He's arguably the face of the current renaissance. So I'm just saying that's the second place I've read this guy's name, who's the face of.
He's involved in psychedelics, but he was not.
I thought he wasn't involved at all.
He's not involved at all in terms of the psilocybin clinical research, the main body of the evidence. Anyway, I would agree with Ryan. Please look at these citations. Yes.
Okay, I have two questions. First one, I remember you saying that it was for personal use or you give to your friends. Am I correct on that? Share with your neighbors?
That would be no longer criminalized under this measure.
Right, okay. In section 3, it says that this is subject, may be subject for any town to a 2% sales tax. So if they're not, this is not going to legalize it for retail, why did they put this in for a sales tax?
The sales tax is for selling the substance to be used under supervision. So people do have to buy the substance to use it in a supervised environment, but they're not taking it home.
They can only buy it through the licensed therapists.
Okay.
So there's the money angle.
But I want to correct one thing. So it is true that a psychiatrist, including my psychiatrist, can't recommend one of these substances for any condition. That would be malpractice until it's FDA approved. However, they can still be on site. So in Oregon,
not during work hours, or they will be delicensed. And you tell me I'm wrong, you can tell me I'm wrong. I'm not on that.
Okay, so I looked up a Oregon Psychedelic Therapy Center that advertised that they have an MD on site 24/7 during working hours. He's not a facilitator.
No, he's there for overdose prevention.
Yeah.
Even though no one ever overdosed except for the 4 people that went.
Well, he's in there in case anything happens, but that could be required by the
It's not a psychiatrist. He's there. That's like an ER doc. He's there with paddles and in the winds in case anything happens.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's essentially he could be a psychiatrist.
That's not required in Massachusetts law, by the way.
The expert body will determine what is required in Massachusetts. I mean, it's not prohibited. And the thing is, these substances have different risk profiles. So ibogaine, for example, it's much more important to be in a clinical controlled environment. And also the different use cases. So for example, the measure accounts for the fact that some populations might require more credentialing. So if you're working, for example, with certain patient groups like veterans with PTSD, you might require more training. In Oregon, a licensed facilitator requires a minimum as a baseline of 160 hours of training to facilitate an experience. But
Can I just ask, you mentioned that it's going to be in a controlled environment, I think you said a couple times.
Yeah.
And it does sound like, I'm not quite, I'm a little confused by that, because you say that the psychiatrist or psychologist, they can't prescribe it.
Yes.
But how is it controlled if someone's growing it and handing it to their friends, and their friends are handing it to their friends? That seems pretty uncontrolled.
They're two different things. So yes, that portion of it.
Yeah, but those two things are in the bill, right? And we either eat the whole bill or we spit the whole thing out.
Yeah, that's true. But the controlled environment is this particular focus because, as I've mentioned before, that other activity is already happening. There's no evidence that this will make that activity less safe. And in addition to that, there are people who want to use this therapeutically who could use more safeguards and support to do that. So this bill creates a regulated system for those people. that
And
they
it
can
creates an unregulated system that can just be handed out to, you know, the buddies on the street corner and stuff.
I mean, it's not a system, but it's no retail component to this. I mean, again, this is already happening. The American Medical Association has endorsed the decriminalization of all substances, not just these non-addictive substances in our measure. So there hasn't been a observed negative public health impact. Again, it's a question, you talk about resources, it's a question of, is this a good use of resources of law enforcement?
There's
Yes.
one last thing that we gotta wrap it
Before
up.
gambling was legalized, bookmaking wasn't exactly a system, but it was.
But bookmaking's big money. This isn't big money anywhere.
Yeah, what you said.
Okay, I want to finish
Make
up
it
my
quick.
first question,
Yeah.
and then I'll go to my second question. No, I'll just go to my second question.
Yeah, yeah.
How does this affect the person when he's driving, working, operating machinery? Because some drugs, they put out saying, you can't operate equipment for 8 hours after taking this drug. How does this,
In the measure, if you have to be driven home after taking it, and that's smart and precautionary. In general, people are impaired when they're impaired, and they're not when they're not. But this bill does not change any laws. It doesn't make impaired driving legal. It doesn't change any laws pertaining to driving under the influence.
or operating equipment?
Yeah,
Okay.
this remains.
That
yeah.
sounds very reasonable and rational. All right, we've got to wrap this up. I passed around the after vote. Unfortunately, our vote is going to be kiltered because a lot of people left who voted in the first one. So what can be said is I moved on one of the questions. I'm not going to share which one, but and it was tough. So if anyone wants to acknowledge that they
I
moved,
also moved on one.
they moved on one of the questions. Anybody else move on one of the questions? No? Okay. All right. Well, I think this was really good. I want to thank everyone for coming. Ryan and Graham, thank you very much. You really earned it tonight.
Herman.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.